It's been quite a journey going back and looking at these 2000s Living Dead films, starting off with Necropolis, and the interesting Rave to the Grave, the two sci-fi Return of the Living Dead sequels. Just recently, we revisited Night of the Living Dead, the 2006 Living Dead remake. And to my surprise, there was a prequel to that film that came out in 2012. Could this finally be the Living Dead film to give respect to the name Living Dead after all these years? There was only one way for me to find out. So you may remember just a few days ago, we went down memory lane and checked out 2006's Night of the Living Dead 3D, starring Sid Haig. It was a film I was aware about for so long, but finally just decided it was time to check it out. I did do the bargain bin Living Dead films for Return of the Living Dead and had a great time with those, and I started learning around the 2000s there are a lot of bargain bin, if you will, Living Dead films. But when doing the research and watching Night of the Living Dead 3D, I learned something quite interesting. Not only was there a sequel, but it actually acted as a prequel to the 2006 movie, which is very interesting considering that the 2006 movie had about $1.5 million in box office revenue under a $750,000 budget. But there was something interesting that happened in the 2010s. The Walking Dead came out, and this would, no pun intended, give so much life to the zombie genre, which I have no doubt had some bearing on this film being possible. Night of the Living Dead 3D Reanimation. That's right, interestingly enough, they did this movie 3D as well. And in the 2006 Night of the Living Dead video I did, I saw some comments saying the prequel that came out in 2012 is actually a little bit better. That really got my attention. So I went on Amazon and tried to find this film on DVD or Blu-ray. It seemed a little bit hard to do because it seems like the American versions of this film is somewhat out of print. But sure enough, Amazon came through with Prime 2-day shipping on this Region ABC Night of the Living Dead Reanimation 3D Blu-ray. Now, have no fear. If you don't have a 3D television, it plays just like a regular movie. Got it at a great price too. It came out $11.99. I was super happy to be able to own this film. But what really caught my attention were the names at the front: Andrew Divoff and Jeffrey Combs. Wow, there's a Jeffrey Combs Living Dead film. Could this be any better? There was only one way for me to find out, and that was to push play. As I was looking at the back, I noticed that this was in fact directed by Jeff Broadstreet yet again. Jeff Broadstreet is the guy who directed the 2006 film, and interestingly enough, I saw that he had worked with Andrew Divoff in the past, which makes the casting make sense considering Andrew Divoff doesn't exactly look like Sid Haig's character. So I had high anticipation getting ready to watch this movie. Was this finally going to be that quote-unquote bargain bin Living Dead film that ended up being pretty good? Well, to be honest with you, I thought, all things considered, that this movie was okay. Not great, not even really good. It's still very, very modest, but Andrew Divoff and Jeffrey Combs do their best to carry this movie through. And this one plays out a lot slower than Night of the Living Dead 2006, yet it's far more interesting. This movie really plays off as a character-driven type movie. Considering this is a prequel, we wanted to really set up the boundaries for what caused the 2006 movie to happen. Andrew Divoff, we're going to see, is the Tovar brother that is in charge of this mortuary, and you'll see there are a lot of bodies in this mortuary that are not exactly dead anymore. This film has about the same amount of characters as the previous one, but it feels a lot more contained. There's not a whole lot of scenes going on. There's obviously the graveyard and the Tovar mortuary. At the end of the first act of this film, Jeffrey Combs is going to arrive. Now, he plays the other Tovar brother that shows up to talk to Andrew Divoff. Now, a positive thing is this: these two genuinely are the lead stars of this film. So it's not one of those cases where the names are at the top of the film and you see them for a few minutes. No, they are in fact the stars, and that is something to applaud. They're going to carry this movie fairly well. It's a lot slower, but there's this really sense of foreboding that plays through this movie that I will give a little bit of credit for. You know that these zombies are going to eventually make their way out of this locked mortuary room where all these reanimated bodies are just lingering in there. And I'll give a little bit of credit here. The room where these bodies are that have been embalmed, that have come back to life, you can almost smell the room. It's so disgusting looking. They made it look really dark and gross, and you can see dripping blood everywhere, and the skin tones look infected. It's not even that they just look dead, but they look infected. So, the makeup stuff in this film, I will actually give a little bit of credit to. These designs aren't exactly the end-all be-all of the genre, but I do appreciate that they had some looks that you'll kind of remember after watching the film. It was fairly charming. There are those quirky characters in here with the mortuary assistants, and then this new girl who comes over to work at the place starts out being this really prim and proper graduate school kid that wants to get a job at the mortuary, but eventually smokes pot with the two younger characters. And it's kind of funny. There is that little bit of comedic relief in this film, but it plays off a hell of a lot better than the 2006 film. So something funny about this film is they actually had a Sarah Palin-inspired goofy character come into the picture. Now, this was 2012, so I can see how at the time that would have been pretty relevant, but watching it now, it just makes me realize how fast time has gone by. This film is 11 years old now, so at first I was like, why is Sarah Palin in this? Then I realized, Christian, 2012 was 11 years ago. All in all, I would have to agree with the comments I got on the previous film. This movie is a step above Night of the Living Dead 2006. In terms of the 3D effects, I really can't give an opinion on it one way or the other, considering I don't have the capability as of right now to watch this film in 3D, but maybe down the road I'll have that capability. But in terms of a movie, and in terms of the bargain bin Living Dead films, I will say that Night of the Living Dead Reanimation has been the best one so far out of Rave to the Grave, Return of the Living Dead Necropolis, Night of the Living Dead 2006. So far, this is the best one. Now, there are still films that we're going to go through, like Flight of the Living Dead and Dance of the Dead in our bargain bin section, and even those later George Romero ones like Diary of the Dead and Survival of the Dead. But for now, I wanted to say that so far, Night of the Living Dead Reanimation has been the most interesting one. Seeing Jeffrey Combs and Andrew Divoff lead this film together was something to really just appreciate as a horror fan, and they carry the movie pretty respectfully. Again, it's a cheaper movie. This is certainly a movie that's made for the horror genre fan, considering it has cult horror actors in it. All in all, I will give Night of the Living Dead 3D a thumbs in the middle. Not bad, but not really great either. Just very modest. But it's a very interesting film considering it was a prequel that came out 6 years after the 2006 film. But I'd like to think that The Walking Dead gave birth to a lot of films like this because of the big resurgence of the zombie genre. Even though I haven't watched The Walking Dead, I will give it a thanks for giving me a movie like this to be able to enjoy, granted 11 years later. Anyway guys, this is another episode on the video series of the Bargain Bin Living Dead films. If you've seen this film or own this film, please let me know. And what are your thoughts on it? Anyway, this is good old CHH, and we'll see you guys next time. Huge giant thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you guys, this would not be possible. To get behind the scenes photos, videos, music, private live streams, and much more, you can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Thank you to my patrons.